Hey, this episode is a little bit different. What I wanted to do is to show you what you might have missed or what you might be looking forward to going into 2025. So, as we go into this quieter period of the year, I've prepared an episode which is essentially a collection of just few conversations that we had in 2024 on What's Web. Now, not all conversations made into the episode because it wasn't the point. The point is to just give you a taste of what do we talk about, and more importantly, as we now head into the Christmas break and the New Year's Eve celebration, I wanted to leave you with some food for thought. Now, the conversations that I've included in this episode, they relate to different challenges. There will be a CRO discussion, an SEO discussion, website marketing, website strategy, content strategy, all kinds of things. Before every snippet, I will tell you who's the guest and what's the episode number should you want to listen to the full episode. And so with that, I will leave you to it and I will see you on the other side. First up is Brendan from episode 15, where we talk about website conversion optimization. Could you speak a little bit to value proposition? How do you look at value proposition in terms of conversion rate optimization? The reason for the question is because it goes back to brand positioning. It goes back to brand voice guidelines. It probably stretches across multiple departments, and probably the value proposition that's right there on the website, it has been achieved through pain and suffering already. So I can kind of imagine why businesses would be reluctant to change anything about it. Just talk to me about it in broad terms, and I can follow up if I need anything.
Sure. So my background is predominantly in B2C. So I think B2B, you're talking about RCPs and you're talking about different kind
Yes,
of
profiles, all of that crazy.
different kind of profiles and different levels of sign off and different levels of who is the buyer and who's but I think generally you can think about them in a similar way. So in my way of defining value proposition is in the mind of your ideal customer, how are you differentiated from your competitors? So what is your sort of secret sauce in terms of your RCP in terms of how you're different? And the approach that I use to understand this is I've a fairly quick and dirty way of doing it. So
You do? Okay,
when
sure.
when you look at interviews and chatting to your customers, I just like to keep my ears open and kind of prod and see what comes out of that. And then when I'm undertaking surveys, what I like to do is try and understand what the shopping criteria is of, or the buying criteria is of customers and prospects. So I'm going to take what's your shipping process, returns, quality, price. There's all of these kind of things that people might have, but what are the key and most important attributes for them when shopping? And then I also like to, in surveys, understand what my competitive framework and overview might look like. So who do my customers think that my competitors are? Because who we think our competitors are might not actually be who. I mean, if you look at B2B products, your most likely competitor is a Google Sheet. I mean, that's how people just do stuff. And then I just like to create a graph of once I've evaluated my competitors and I've evaluated myself along these areas of what customers find are important in terms of how they differentiate themselves. So um, let's say it's shipping, quality, and price. I like to look at all of the main customer touch points and see how my competitors are communicating. So look at social media, look at how they advertise themselves on brand searches, look at what the homepage looks like. Are they talking about these key areas that customers care about? I mean, it depends. If you're Coca-Cola, people just buy Coke because Coke is Coke. The advertising is not going to make a difference. But if you're in a more competitive market or smaller brand, are you touching and talking about the areas that are important to customers? And my ideal scenario is that I have a matrix of uh, competitors and ways people shop, and I like to find a gap that is important to customers and nobody's talking about, because that gives me a differentiating attribute that I can use to communicate um, when I'm looking at uh, homepage messaging or sign up page messaging or something, because I know that it's a motivator. Another tip that I find useful here is that if you can work with the paid acquisition team and you've got a couple of statements that you think are important for leverage. So again, quality, price, and shipping. When you look at those messages and you put them into your Google ad messaging, your text messaging, what's your click-through rate on them? Because whatever your click-through rate is on one of those messages, the higher click-through rate means that it's resonating more effectively with customers. So you can use that to as a sort of proxy for how it should work on the website.
That's actually a very good idea. So effectively use PPC for testing in a way?
Yeah, for validating, for testing.
And it's actually not that expensive, right? I mean, if you just keep it running for a
No.
while, it's really, the click can be very low cost.
Yeah, and I mean, it's interesting to look at it on brand terms also, which are super low price normally, because your relevancy is super high.
Absolutely.
But it's people who are searching for your brand. Well, that's great, because they are the Uber customer, and if they are very focused on shipping or something like that, then you know, okay, this is a clue. Maybe I should be messaging this more effectively on my homepage. Maybe I should be doing it more in whatever, email, outreach, social, who knows. But homepage is always a good one. The other thing that I would say about value proposition is that, well, two things. One, if you get it right and resonate, it makes a very big difference.
So you'll know when you get it right.
Yeah, it strikes a chord with people. I find it's an iterative process. So
Absolutely.
you don't. It's not something you get right immediately. It's a sort of a, okay, they responded differently to that one, and we had these two messages, and maybe that's a bit of this one and a bit of that one, and we get this feedback. So it's an iterative process in order to get there, but useful.
Next is Vasi from episode 11, where we talk about brand positioning and messaging. I wanted to ask you about a framework. One framework in particular, which I think you're a fan of, and that's something we also spoke about in the previous podcast episode with Ibrahim. That is jobs to be done, right?
Yeah.
Can you tell me in your own words what it does, what it is, and how does it influence your approach to work?
Okay, you have to stop me at one point, because when I start talking about jobs to be done, I tend to go forever and ever. So I'll do my best to self-edit, but
okay, should.
Jobs to be done is really about understanding your customer on a deeper than the superficial feature focus / practical level, and figuring out what's really driving their buying decision or any other type of user behavior, really, because we've used jobs to be done both for the purposes of customer acquisition, but also for improving retention and figuring out how to improve a feature and so on. So in the simplest terms, jobs to be done looks beyond the actual things that the person is doing into what they are trying to achieve in the long run. And I I love one example, which is if you're selling lawnmowers for people to mow their lawn, if they have like a country house or a house in the city. You might be tempted to sort of look at your product and be like, okay, so what are the features of like Husqvarna and all the big brands out there? How are we better? And what can we do to present our product in a better light? But what you may be forgetting is that there are a lot of different competitors that you're not even addressing in this case. And I think that this is when looking at competition is very clearly to see how jobs to be done goes beyond, but that's not the only situation where it does. So if you're looking at the standard approach, you're like, okay, we have this lawnmower, there are other lawnmowers on the market. How are we better? What features are better? Maybe it's price, maybe it's that it doesn't require as much fuel, or that it's lighter, so the woman of the house can also use it, and we can make a pink version and it's going to be brilliant. What we're not paying attention to, though, is that the person isn't, like, you don't wake up in the morning and you're not like, oh, I can't wait to mow the lawn. This is actually a tedious task, but it helps you achieve something more. You have a well-kept home, you have a well-kept lawn. Maybe you're more you're happier because your kids have somewhere nice to play at, or maybe you're happier because you're showing to all the neighbors that you're the best neighbor in the area, and your house just looks way better than theirs. So in this situation, you can already think about, okay, how are we a better solution than hiring the neighbor's kid to do that job for $10 on the weekend? Or how are we better than hiring a professional landscaper? Because these are all, in the mind of the customer, these are the types of solutions that they can also use to achieve that same effect, to have a well-kept lawn. And then you can go even a step further, and you can really think about the motivation and the personal progress that the person is making. So if for me it's important to be the best neighbor in the neighborhood, then one way to do that would be to have a well-kept lawn. But another way would be to have the best Halloween or Christmas decorations. So now you see that what you're trying to achieve in the end is much different than what you started off with. And that impacts who you think of as a competitor. It impacts how you think of the messaging that you want to create, of course. It may change the way you promote your product or the different partners that you work with, and it can have a lot of different implications. But it all starts with really understanding what's driving me as a user to actually do some significant change in my life and choose a solution like yours.
Okay, so what I'm hearing from you is that jobs to be done framework puts focus on the user rather than the solutions that already exist on the market. It changes the mindset, how you approach thinking about your own product. What's the point of reference? You changing point of reference. Is that right?
It is, and I think the other big element to it is that it goes beyond the task at hand to look at the deeper motivation of that customer.
Okay.
Because it also means that with different motivation, me and you, we can be completing the same type of task, but we choose a different solution just because the motivation is different. I'm pretty sure that we have a different favorite brand of backpacks.
Oh yeah.
because one thing will be important to you in a backpack
Mm-hmm.
and a different thing will be important to me.
Mm-hmm.
So that motivation element to it changes your choice as a customer, and as a marketer you need to be aware of that to really figure out how to approach different customers.
Now, Craig from episode 12, where we talk about the role of high converting websites. We are still in this discussion, we are still on the input side of the thing. Everything we're talking so far is very inward looking. You are getting into the ant nest and you try to sort things out right there before you actually look out the window first, right? How do you, so after you've done all those discussions, all those interviews, and you have a good idea of where you want to go with this, it's still just an assumption. How do you validate that assumption? You mentioned tests. Could you speak to that a bit?
So before going out to the market, and the thing, by the way, we should say this is an ongoing process. There's never one time for us to get this right. When I work with clients, this is really about how can we speed up that process of narrowing down the target market or narrowing down to key messaging and value propositions. But the thing that we ask for, the thing that I ask for is, what data do you already have? And often startups will underestimate their existing data sets, either because they're early stage, they don't think that they've got enough to validate, and so they sort of discount some of the campaigns they've done previously or some of the customer conversations that they've already had, and that's why they come to us. What I will say is, you are never going to have enough data for you to be in this position to say, we are 100% confident that this is the right segment that we should target, or this is the right messaging that we should prioritize and lead on. We will do lots of research to get to that answer confidently, but I have been in many situations where founders or senior stakeholders will say, I still don't think we're quite clear enough, or we have enough to narrow down. And I say, the only way that you're going to know the answer to that is if we actually go out and start using this and start testing this. So the ways that we can validate that will be for salespeople on those initial qualification calls when they're talking about the product, to A/B test some of our messaging. We will do cold outbound, either from the sales team, or we will do that in email campaigns. So, platforms like Apollo are really great because you can segment your audience and you can send out email campaigns to large groups, and you can start to see where those interest signals are, who's converting, who's not. If you are a startup and you already have a little bit of website traffic, and that website traffic comes from particular regions, then again, you can start looking at when you do A/B tests of messaging on your website, how does that change the behavior of people that visit? So there are different ways, practically, tactically, that you can do that testing. But I always think the interesting point is, you will always you always have to make a compromise. You always have to make a call at some point that you go out to the market and you begin testing it. And you go out to the market to test in order to find that data. So why not just get going with it anyway? Like to me, it doesn't really kind of make sense that you're just going to stay where you currently are. And it is something that I see often, which is this need for absolute 100% confidence and clarity. And so the validation thing that you ask about, Tomasz, is interesting, because ultimately it's about data, and it's getting data to back up or test hypotheses. You might have an idea of where you think something's going to go, but for product marketers, we really should leave that assumption baggage at the door. And sometimes that data can tell us something different. I've been working on a project very recently where we had, personally, a pretty strong conviction that there is this partnership channel go-to-market opportunity. But actually, the client turns around and said, oh, sorry, we just remembered. We actually did a campaign on this 2 years ago, and actually it failed miserably. And so there are still some things that we want to figure out with that and say, okay, is that because of timing? But was that because the messaging was off? Actually, were you reaching out to the wrong partners? So there still could be reasons why our assumption that actually this could be a potential good opportunity or go-to-market channel is a good one. And when you tested it, there are reasons why it didn't work, or the data that they have, which is sort of dated, was from a couple of years ago, actually still stacks up and actually says, what, that isn't a channel. So you can always acquire loads of data, but at the end of the day, even with that data that backs up an argument, there is still a little bit of a leap of faith that you have to take even after that. So I think there is always a trade-off between getting loads of data, doing loads of testing, and then really going in and leaning in on messaging, go-to-market, demand gen, based around that positioning and messaging. Sometimes you just have to kind of get going. Otherwise, you're waiting another 6 to 12 months to just feel a bit more confident. And will you be confident enough even at that point?
The way you describe it and how I see it, being comfortable with a certain level of uncertainty is pretty much a must for a decision maker. And the more you want to know, the more it's going to cost you. And the 100% certainty is almost unachievable. It's just like, imagine the cost of census being 100% accurate.
Yeah,
it's just like you pretty much can't do it. Like, this is just impossible. All right. So if you think of uncertainty as a graph, one axis is the uncertainty, the other one is cost of reducing that uncertainty. When you know nothing, almost anything will tell you something. Even your gut, even your experience is very valuable at this point. Just do something and see what comes out of it. But the more you climb up and the more certain you become on the topic, 30%, 40, 60%, you'll have to dish out more and more money, more and more resources to move just a bit, like diminishing returns, essentially, right? That's about it, right?
Totally. And like the irony of this idea of, we want to wait because we want to know more information, is that you're preventing yourself from going to market, which is actually a way of acquiring information and data. So you put yourself into this very risk averse position of, I don't want to go out to the market and say, this is who I am, this is what I do, because you're sort of scared of failing. And when you failure is acquisition of data. And it's acquisition of data saying you were thinking about going down this path, but actually that path is not going to work for you. You will, by failing faster, this is this thing that we hear in B2B SaaS and tech, and we're just like rolling our eyes and going, "God, this is so tech, bro." But I think when you're in that moment, actually the whole fail fast thing really makes a whole lot of sense. If you fail fast, you can succeed faster. And I think also the thing you talk about, Tomasz, around the risk taking, I've been having conversations with founders about this recently, even from my perspective. And I think it's interesting when you make the decision to start up a business and do the whole entrepreneurial thing, that is a risk, but you never stop taking risks. You are just moving from one risk taking exercise to the next. You have to continue taking those risks. Obviously, as humans, we have to sort of find a safety zone temporarily. We can't be constantly putting ourselves in the zone of moving outside our comfort zone every minute of every day. But you kind of sort of have to continue moving yourself outside of your comfort zone if you want your startup to grow and to acquire data. So if you're scared that you don't have enough information, you're not confident enough to make that decision, then you're kind of wasting time.
Next up, Pablo from episode 17, where we talked about websites being your 24/7 salesperson. When you build a website for software developers, the user journey is very straightforward. You can ask them what they want to hear, what to download, and what to convert from. Simples. When you have multiple stakeholders, there's never a decision made within one website session, most likely. There's different people coming in and out to download stuff, to learn stuff, find out the information, to not veto the project. How do you build a website to account for that kind of complexity on the buyer's end?
Yeah, that's a good question because I've been there a few times, and what I learned over the years is someone basically have to take the lead within the team to build that website and to have the ownership of that. I mean, I can see those websites built by committee that lots of people they jump into that. Oh, I have this. Yeah, I have this idea. Oh, let's change the colors of this and so on. So obviously, someone has to look into the website. Back to what we mentioned before, as a product, not as a project. Because as a project, the website will never really optimize the value that they can bring to a business. So my take is, if you are in charge, I mean, I'm thinking now maybe like any marketers, like they're looking into this. If you are in charge of the project, don't think it's a project, think it's a product. Make sure that you stick to your guns in terms of, okay, what is the purpose of the website? I mean, how is the website going to help to grow the business? Also, use as much data as possible to back your kind of roadmap, basically, for the website. And when it comes to data, also not just what you find in terms of qualitative data, also research as well, because you have to do research. I mean, in terms, which again sounds very overwhelming, but I mean these days is very easy as well to. I mean, if you start from scratch and you don't have any customer, you always can get people that can be keen to. I mean, spend like 30 minutes with you and do some kind of like a research session with that, and it doesn't cost much these days. But still, if you thinking mostly of startups that they already have some a customer volume, I mean, use that. But sometimes you don't even have to do the sessions. I mean, again, looking into the analytics from Google Analytics or expanding low amplitude will tell you quite a lot. But especially when it comes to positioning and so on, the value and so on, my recommendation for whoever is in charge of the product, which is the website, is to, again, be very, very strong when it comes to say, look, we are here to showcase how to showcase how the business is solving a problem, solving a pain point for the visitor. And we have to get that visitor into our funnel. So we have to get a cold visitor into a warm lead. And of course, there will be a few points. And eventually, depending on your product, potentially even convert them into that. So you have to make sure that everyone in the business understand that is a website is not an online brochure. It's basically, as I said before, it's a sales tool, and hence the website has to serve that. Thinking especially of these SaaS products and PLG companies, because otherwise, if you fall into the trap of we have 25 amazing features, let's list all of them. I mean, people will get overwhelmed. I mean, let's face it, is your website is not a business card. I mean, it's a dynamic lead machine.
Next, we have Michelle from episode 18, where we talk about conversion rate optimization 101.
So you have the product market fit lesson. Okay, you've been through all of that in your life. How did that impact your approach to CRO? What, especially in those like high stakes context, I imagine. Just take us through it.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question. For me, CRO, the way that I see CRO, conversion rate optimization, is really pushing a user from one step to another in the process. So getting them from point A to point B to point C, and really knowing exactly what steps you are pushing them towards. I think that with all my different experiences, I think that it's important to see CRO in context. At the end of the day, a business is about effectively creating value and making revenue impact. And so CRO needs to tie into that, into what stage that the business is in. And CRO is going to look very, very different for an early stage company compared to a giant multinational. And so I think being able to take a step back and see the bigger picture, and I say this because when we start to work with companies, a lot of teams have preconceived ideas of what they see CRO as being and things that they want to test, whether that's like different colors on the CTA buttons or different headlines and things like that. And I think that one really key thing for us is to just take a step back And to actually look through all your data from the top of the funnel to the bottom of the funnel, line by line, and just to understand what is actually going to make revenue impact here and what is just nice to have. And one thing to notice that, in the early stage startups community, people are under the pump. They are super busy. They are super busy expanding the company. They don't have time to sit and gather all the data from all the different analytics platforms, from your user recordings, your product analytics, etc., etc. So very often we find that teams haven't had the time or space to actually take that step back and take that 4-week period to really look through their data and the full set of conversion rates and how they're performing relative to each other. And without that key piece, it's very difficult to order and say, hey, what's going to make the biggest revenue impact first, and examine that in line with your unit economics and say, well, actually, what do we need our conversion rates to be to get the unit economics that we're really looking to achieve? So I think seeing it from the lens with a bird's eye view with the idea of revenue impact is one of the key things that I really focus on.
I will circle back to data in a second, because that's a huge topic for me as well. I absolutely love data, getting data and making sense out of data, and that's a huge thing for me. But you said conversion rate optimization is just essentially moving people from A to B, from B to C, etc., until they convert. It's in the name. And then you in the following sentence you mentioned funnels. So I assume these two work together in parallel somehow, or one is like a context or maybe segregation tool, and the other one is tool that pushes people between categories within the funnel. Like how those two, what's the difference? How these two work together? Can you speak to that a bit? Does that make sense? The question?
Yeah, I think funnels is a very interesting concept nowadays, because you have people doing all sorts of actions on your site depending on how they learned about your company. And so we see people who hear about a company or a brand through word of mouth. They tend to or a very trusted source of recommendation. They come in, they sign up straight away. That trust was built even before they hit the website. So that conversion rate optimization is not really that relevant, is it? If they're just coming, they're a one-click converter, and that's what we love, and that's what we love to try to build top funnel, these channels that really push these high value recommendations word of mouth. But if you're doing Google ads, someone's never really heard of your brand and they're evaluating your company at the same time with 5 other SaaS solutions with very similar software features, they'll probably be going through your website and comparing prices, comparing features and things like that. And you'll tend to see typical journeys that people have depending on what they're looking on and who your ICP is. And from there, you can get an idea of the patterns that people who typically convert exhibit and patterns that people who don't exhibit. And you want to try and bridge the two. You want to try and push people to take the steps that are associated typically with people who do convert.
Do I understand it correctly then that conversion rate optimization can work on many levels of zoom, like so you can really zoom in and really obsess about the color of a button, but you can also zoom out and look at the page layout or even the user journey through the website? Is that how should we think about conversion rate optimization?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I actually don't know if there are like gods of the CRO definition. For me, because I tend to look at everything from a revenue perspective and just really pushing as many people as we can to our desired action of purchase, I see it in a very holistic way. So when I see conversion rate optimization, I literally just see it through the lens of a definition of just moving one person from A to B. So for example, and whether or not this definition aligns with what the gods of CRO want to say, not sure, but this is just the way I see it. So for example, depending on your go-to-market motion, CRO can look very different. So for example, let's say you are a sales-led or a sales-assisted go-to-market motion. So you're not really product-led, you've got a sales team. And one way that I see CRO is pushing people to consume the right content that's going to enable them to make the right decisions. So looking at buyer enablement content, and also conversion rate optimization in terms of like helping people move through the right stages of the funnel. So just knowing about the product, to understanding what it can really do for them, to comparing it with other solutions, and in the sales process as well, moving them from inquiring to doing a demo to closing the deal, and having the right revenue enablement content in play is there as well. And there are conversion rates there as well. Like, you want to move someone from a demo to a close, and the steps that happen in between in terms of the pipeline, I also see that as an optimization game that needs to be really, really carefully managed. And so in that way, I think that, for these types of go-to-market motions, a lot of the CRO is really like done by like a strong revenue enablement team, whereas for a product-led growth motion, a lot of CRO is done on the marketing and website front. And so, optimizing conversion rates on landing pages and movements from free trial to paid and so on.
Next, episode 20 with Andy, where we talk about website marketing with AI.
Now, Bofu, we talked about it a bit. You mentioned, I think it was a newsletter. Conversion, that's what we care about at this stage. That's what we want. What role does AI play here in improving those conversions? Does it lean more towards like predictive analytics or optimizing components like call to actions? Where is it?
Well, the best use case I've seen so far is pretty low tech. Most web pages have big missed opportunities. Show me any B2B service page, and I'll show you, even at a glance, probably some things that might make a difference. Like, skilled conversion optimizers who've done lots and lots of web can look at things and almost just heuristically see opportunity.
Just point at it. Yeah.
Yep. Sometimes. Yep. Do 1,000 websites and you'll get a pretty good idea. If you're in and out of analytics accounts every day, you get a pretty good idea. But maybe you haven't built 1,000 websites, which is normal. AI, if you give it your persona first and give it your web page, will tell you all of the questions you failed to answer for your visitor, all of the objections you failed to address for your visitor, and all of the assertions that you did not support with evidence. Service pages, really, that's the job. The visitor lands, question 1, am I in the right place? Question 2, are they legitimate? Have they done this before? Done it for companies like mine? So that's the job of a service page. A high converting service page guides the eye through a visual hierarchy during which they get more credible, they get more informed and persuaded as they go down this page. So with that in mind, it's completely an act of empathy. What does this person need to see? AI is an amazing tool for auditing B2B service pages. I have prompts that will tell you where, if you give it the persona and give it the page, it will tell you the extent to which you're meeting or not meeting the information needs of that visitor. What are the biggest gaps? Again, it's not about finding efficiencies. I'm using it to find deficiencies.
Yes. Yeah.
So no, without any predictive analytics, without any fancy tools, just a full page screenshot and a ChatGPT Plus account and a battle tested persona, it will quickly give you ideas on how to make that a higher converting page. And so many pages are so bad to begin with. I was looking at a site, we did this exercise. They make carpet for big hotels. And this page about carpet for hospitality services didn't mention like flame retardant regulation. That's important.
Oh, it is.
Durability.
Especially in the UK. Yeah.
So the page was just kind of a bunch of brandy language. Like, it's just kind of, it was written by a brand marketer and not by a conversion optimizer. So there were tons of, so many URLs on the web are just, would benefit from a brief AI powered persona driven audit. And that's bottom of funnel all day long.
Okay. Well, that's sounds fairly simple. Would you be okay with us getting access to those prompts? That'd be, I know,
of course.
That's okay. Yeah. Would you be okay to share that
sure.
at some point? Maybe not on the screen right now, because we obviously don't show the screen, but somewhere there in the notes, or maybe some kind of sheet. Yeah,
I will. I've published them before. I'll share the links, and you can find them in the show notes.
Oh, that'd be awesome. Thank you so much, Andy. That's absolutely brilliant.
Now, you mentioned carpets. I mean, we all know what carpets are. Category is obvious. How does that pan out when we are talking about something new on the market? Because again, AI doesn't have really, like, it doesn't have creativity. It doesn't go beyond what it's known. What about new category, nuanced products, something like disruptors almost on the well-established markets? Can we rely on AI to do the judgment for the landing page in such scenario?
Well, if you gave, I think if you gave it a detailed persona, then you could, because it's mostly mapping the information about the visitor that you provided with the copy on the web page that you provided. So I don't know that it needs, I mean, we could make up, I'm targeting space aliens who are worried about, running out of, trinium crystals fuel for their flight to Alpha Centauri. Does this page satisfy
I like
their
how you
information
come up
needs?
with those things on
It
the
would tell
spot.
us. I made that. But your point's really interesting, and I'm fascinated by this difference between things that are already well known and things that are not. One big difference that you'll find quickly is that innovators have struggled in search because there's nobody looking for that thing yet.
Yes.
So depending on that product, if you're a disruptor, often you'll do a better job of connecting with your audience in social than search. There might not be keyword opportunities. Inventors struggle. There's no search volume or demand or awareness. You're inventing a new category. Search is not going to be an opportunity for you unless you target sort of the problem-related key phrases, which is still possible. But that's a really interesting topic because it highlights sort of the things that, like the topic channel fit.
Yeah.
Certain topics work in different channels, and innovators don't always find, it's hard to be discovered for something people aren't looking for.
And finally, Scott from episode 19, where we talk about building SEO that drive leads. Can you, first of all, before we dive into any kind of practical tips, etc., could you try to explain to me what's different in approach for small business versus enterprise business? How should they think of SEO depending on their stage?
Yeah. So to simplify, to kind of boil it all down, it was the way I teach SEO, for example, there's three things to it. There's content, there's link building, and there's technical, right? So all of those can be important, but at different stages of your business or website growth, those three things are going to have different priorities. So let's say when I worked with KPMG as a client in the past, large business, right? They were targeting 142 countries and languages. So they had this whole international website, right? Wow. They had a ton of backlinks, right? They had a ton of content, right? So KPMG as a brand, they get all this exposure from, news and everything. They do all sorts of case studies and whatnot. So that, everybody will link to them at some point or another. So when it comes to websites like that, quite often SEO will be less about building extra links and is going to be more about solving technical problems. How do we make sure that Google can crawl the pages? How can we make sure that the crawl is efficient? How do we make sure that we're not blocking anything? How do we make sure that any internal linking that happens on that site is optimized for us to rank and kind of make sure that, the content is very well written? So content and technical kind of become a big part of that, right? On the enterprise level, on large websites, especially technical. Solving technical problems is half of the job on SEO, enterprise SEO. As you start to kind of go down the size of the business, going to middle size businesses that have fair, middle, not huge websites, but big enough websites, there you start to look at more into content play, right? So technical is not as big of a problem. You probably can solve it because, the website is not as big to deal with. It's probably built on some very friendly CMS, whether it's WordPress or Webflow or something along those lines, where you can at least do some automation in the back end and whatnot. So content becomes a big part of it. How do we create more content? How do we create better content? How do we make sure that that content is properly internally linked and everything like that? So on that middle size, content becomes important. And then I would say surgical strategic link building becomes kind of important because mid-sized businesses, mid-sized websites, they will have some link portfolio already. right? They don't get to that size without any exposure. They'll have something in a portfolio, and so some link building to particular page you're trying to rank for might be important, but the key point there are going to be content. So think about like website like HubSpot, maybe. I don't know if that would fall in. It wouldn't be enterprise like KPMG, but it would be probably something more mid-size. So for them, they can do some link building, but they naturally get a lot of links too. And so content becomes a big part of it. And that's why you see so much investment in HubSpot in buying all those content businesses, whether they're buying newsletters, whether they're buying podcasts, like they're becoming a media company rather than a software. Yeah. And then you get into the small business, small website, space. And there, technical becomes almost not important, right? If you only have a dozen pages, a couple dozen pages, like you can solve those problems. When I say not important, I mean like you solve them at the beginning within a month or two, but then it shouldn't be a problem over the course of 12 months. Because if I work with KPMG, I have to spend 12 months just fixing one problem because it has to get approvals and, there's 50 stakeholders to go through just to put a check mark next to something that you want to do. And so the timelines are just so much longer. But on a small size business, you can get approvals in the same day, and then you go and you solve that problem. Whether that's indexing issues, whether it's JavaScript or whatever it might be, that's not working well for SEO. As long as you solve that, the rest is all about link building and all about content. All right, so lots of link building because we have to build that authority, and lots of content because we have to have content for us to rank. And so really depends on what size, not even a business, but the size of the website that you are working with, where they're at in order to prioritize links, content, or technical. And then your strategy will be just, customized based on that. That's how I view it. And most of the time it lines up quite well. And it works that way. Obviously, if a business raised $100 million and they have a brand new website, it is a big business technically, but it's not a big website. You still apply small website SEO to it, which is lots of links, lots of content. Yeah.
Okay, that's very interesting. So you look at the size of the website almost independently to the size of a business.
100%.
So because a business is huge doesn't mean their website is any significant size.
Yeah, because you can work. It can be a second or third time founder, right? And they can raise a ton of money because of their reputation or prior exits, and so they can bring a ton of funding to the business already, and they know it's going to be a successful business based on their past history. So it is already kind of a big business in terms of its evaluation, but the website might just be brand new. Right. So we've worked with some of those businesses in the past. And, for us, it's more of a question, do you have the budget? Because usually you don't want to end up in a situation where the business is small and the website is small, because then it's a grind. And I know that because I have a portfolio of my own small businesses. And it's a brand new website and a brand new business, and it's a grind. You have to put a lot of effort into link building. You have to put a lot of effort into content and just keep stacking that over the long term. But if you can shortcut it with huge budgets, anything is possible. Like you'll do PR, you'll create good quality content, you'll invest into video, and then you'll utilize all the other channels to support SEO, or to utilize whatever you create for SEO, you'll use it in other channels to maximize the ROI from that content, and then it flows nicely from there.
I hope you enjoyed this little summary of 2024, and we look forward to seeing you again in 2025. The best way to support this podcast is by sharing it with a friend and leaving a follow. So thank you so much for your support, and I wish you a very good break.